All right, 8:14 now. An international outrage may finally be taking a toll on pro-Russian separatists. Those separatists have been blocking access to the Malaysian airliner taken down by a missile last week. Earlier today, a full view of international media in full view, Malaysia Air Flight 17's flight recorders, those black boxes you hear so much about, loaded into bags and turned over to the Malaysian leaders. And a train with the recovered remains of some of the nearly 300 aboard began the journey from eastern Ukraine. Now, all of this after a number of world leaders expressed outrage because Ukrainian rebels appeared to tamper with the evidence and block access. Yesterday in New York, the United Nations Security Council voted last night on an Australian proposed resolution. It demands international access to the crash site of Malaysian Flight 17.
We must have answers. We must have justice. We owe it to the victims and their families to determine what happened and who was responsible. The resolution acknowledges the investigations already underway. It demands that safe, secure, full and unrestricted access to the crash site be provided so the investigating authorities can carry out their work. It is despicable that this access is not being provided. It is an affront to the victims and their families. All states, armed groups, everyone must cooperate with the investigation.
Yesterday, the UN Security Council took a step toward injecting a dose of order into the otherwise chaotic investigation. Luke Vargas, the UN Bureau Chief for Talk Radio News Service, was there to witness the diplomacy firsthand. He joins us on the phone this morning. And Luke, so you actually sat in on the Security Council vote yesterday. Who was there? What happened?
Hey, good morning. So yes, it was the Council's 15 members were all there. But what happens when issues strike really close to home for this Council is that some of the UN ambassadors from countries like Australia take a back seat and their foreign ministers come and take their place. That's what you saw in that first clip. That was the foreign minister of Australia sitting there. She was joined by the Dutch foreign minister. Of course, the Netherlands lost 193 of its citizens in this plane crash, and their foreign minister came. He communicated what he said was the indignity of first losing your husband and then suffering again as you watch a rebel steal the wedding ring off his finger. This is this very emotional issue of all the tampering that's been occurring at the site. As you mentioned in the intro, here's what they agreed to briefly. They're calling for this independent investigation which the Dutch and the UN are going to oversee. They demanded that the groups mingling around the crash site stop tampering with the debris immediately. And finally, and this is the murkiest language, and perhaps the reason Russia decided to vote for this resolution, it says they're going to bring justice to whoever's responsible. And given the lawlessness of this part of Ukraine, the porous border with Russia, that's going to be very hard to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if those responsible are already in hiding, perhaps.
Yeah, Luke, and I know that some of this involves working with the rebels there in that part of the world. Is that risky at all?
Well, it's more contact with foreign governments than they've ever had, but I don't see it risking perhaps legitimizing them in any way. This is still a war. There's a lot working against them. First, from a PR standpoint, aviation accidents are supposed to follow a script of international cooperation, and when they don't, people all around the world react angrily, as we see here. So the tolerance for the behavior of these rebels is dwindling. And second, these rebels are a fighting force. They're not a government, so they've got to keep fighting to keep existing. And in order to do that, they'll need more military support from Russia. And just right now, as we speak, the European Union foreign ministers are meeting to talk about new sanctions. They're going to propose cutting off all European military exports to Russia. I don't see the support lines, the supply lines to these rebels being allowed to remain open between Russia and Ukraine for very much longer. I think policies are really snapping into focus now.
All right, that's Luke Vargas with he's the UN Bureau Chief for Talk Radio News Service. Luke, thanks for the insight.
Of course, thank you.
8:19 now, still to